In the year 30 AD,
Jews were blamed for Jesus' crucifixion.
this was wrong.
It was in the hands of Roman authorities under the Pontius Pilate. In the year of 379, the Protestant Reformation brought no end to the anti-Jewish. They buried their books and set their synagogues on fire. In the year of 897, throughout the centuries, Jews were restricted by many things, like land owning, holding public office, occupation, and were excluded from Christian society. In 1095, Pope Urban II called for the liberation of Jerusalem Christian crusaders to free the Holy Land. However, during that process, they slaughtered Jews. In 1215, in Rome, Jews were forced to wear the badge of shame in all Christian countries. This was an order from the Lateran Council of Rome. In addition, they were not allowed to work in public and their taxes were increased. In 1240, in Austria, Jews were imprisoned, converted, expelled, or burned for property confiscation. In 1264, in Germany, Jews were forced to wear a Dune's cap. This was an order from the Council of Vienna. In 1291, France expelled the Jewish refugees that were from England. In the year of 1349, there were many nasty rumors about the Jews, which were taken as the truth. Some say Jews poisoned the well in Europe, which caused the Black Plague. And some say they used Christian blood for their rituals. During the World War II, around 1939 to 1945, there was the Holocaust. The Nazis killed around 6 million Jews and millions of other civilians throughout Europe. In 2003, in Paris, Jewish schools were bombed, and during prayer service in Istanbul, 2 synagogues were bombed. Even today, there are still events of anti-Semitism, like the recent Target shooting in the Jewish market in France.
How were Jews oppressed in Elizabethan England? During Queen Elizabeth I's reign, there was ongoing persecution of the Jewish people and race. The question of why remains a prominent factor in our lives today. Although there are some historical occurrences that may have led up to England's anti-Semitism. For example, in 1558, when Elizabeth came into power, she had converted the monarchy to Protestant church, and therefore the citizens of England were expected to follow their queen. Jews, being a separate religion, were oppressed because of this along with Catholics, to a lesser extent. Secondly, in the past, during medieval times, Jewish people were given a bad reputation when the Black Plague killed many English people. Knowing how the horrible disease started in 1348, it was easy to blame the Jews despite the fact that many of them had died. The fear inflicted into so many people started a hatred that spread like wildfire through England, and many heads of houses were executed. So, this led to the current king to exile Jews from England in 1255 until centuries after, advocates fought for their re-entry. Moreover, after the Jewish people's return, many old wives' tales had inflicted fear and uncertainty into uneducated Protestants. Next, there was a law evoked that Jewish people, regardless of previous qualifications, could only hold two occupations: moneylenders and peddlers. In brief, through the Elizabethan era, the oppression of Jews was based on a history of continuous persecution that's demonstrated in Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice. What stereotypes and propaganda existed in Elizabethan England? The era of Queen Elizabeth I lasted from 1558 until 1603. During these 4 decades, many stereotypes and propaganda were created and portrayed on the behalf of Christians to Jews. Considering it had not been long since the return of the Jewish people to England, there were not many known characteristics or facts about the Jewish race and religion. In fact, in Shakespeare's time, it is most likely he never met a Jewish person, for if they practiced their faith, it would have been in utmost secrecy. Some physical stereotypes used to identify a Jew were hunched over, hooked nose, and long pointed beard. They were also believed to coincide with the devil and practice witchcraft. In conclusion, throughout the Elizabethan era, there wasn't very much sympathy towards Jews.
The role of women in the Elizabethan era. They were generally regarded as possessions of men. Fathers would want to marry off their daughters in order to extend their properties or form alliances. And husbands often beat their wives. Women were expected to bear children, even though many died in childbirth. And children often died very young. Women would perhaps have a child every year she was able, which usually led to anemia and other health problems, not then understood. They were not expected to be educated. Though noble families did educate their daughters. All were taught how to run a household, sew, prepare food and preserves, and medicines, the typical gender roles of women. Women did not have any rights. Their fathers would provide a dowry which they would bring to their husband on marriage. Thereafter, that dowry would be his. If they did not marry, the usual alternative was entering the convent and becoming a nun. Women were expected to be submissive, chaste, and obedient. And were considered inferior to men. Disobedience was seen as a crime against their religion. The Church firmly believed this and quoted the Bible in order to ensure the continued adherence to this principle. The Scottish Protestant leader John Knox wrote, "Woman in her greatest perfection was made to serve and obey man." In The Merchant of Venice, it is said, "The devil can cite scripture for his purpose." However, Queen Elizabeth I, who lived from 1533 to 1603, never married. She was an independent and dominant woman who would not share her throne with a man. She would also have been required to show total obedience to her husband.